History is not a simple story, it's a vast library, filled with both celebrated and neglected chapters. Some of the most important stories are hidden, stories that challenge our national myths and force us to confront uncomfortable truths. One such chapter, the mass removal of people of Mexican descent during the Great Depression. This is a story of fear, economic panic, and injustice. Hundreds of thousands, including U.S. citizens, were pushed out of the country. They were targeted not for any crime, but for their ethnicity, becoming scapegoats during a time of economic suffering. Their removal was framed as a solution to unemployment, but the reality was coercion, intimidation, and civil rights violations. The term repatriation suggested a voluntary return, but for most, it was anything but voluntary. Families were driven out by government pressure, public hostility, and denial of aid. American-born children were sent to a country they'd never known, stripped of their birthright. This history is not just academic, it's a lesson in civic responsibility and the fragility of citizenship. It shows how fear and prejudice can erode justice, and how unchecked bureaucracy can become an instrument of oppression. By examining this dark chapter, we see the roots of anti-immigrant sentiment and the resilience of those who endured. This history is a mirror, reflecting a past with profound implications for our present and future. To understand America, we must confront these hidden chapters. Only then can we hope to build a more just society. The Mexican repatriation can't be understood without the context of the Great Depression. The 1929 stock market crash plunged the U.S. into economic chaos. Banks failed, factories closed, and unemployment soared. Desperate for solutions, leaders looked for scapegoats. President Hoover claimed deporting aliens would create jobs for Americans, a message that resonated with a fearful public. People of Mexican descent, once valued as essential workers, were suddenly seen as competitors and a drain on resources. Government officials, labor unions, and the media fueled this narrative, exaggerating numbers and economic impact. Cities argued it was cheaper to send Mexicans back than support them on relief. The federal government, led by Secretary of Labor William Doak, intensified immigration enforcement, targeting Mexicans disproportionately. Local authorities, emboldened by Washington, launched aggressive removal campaigns. This synergy between federal rhetoric and local action set the stage for a massive, decentralized campaign that tore communities apart. The scapegoating of Mexican communities became official policy. Economic crisis became an excuse for exclusion. The consequences would be devastating. The official story was voluntary repatriation, a humane, orderly return home. In reality, it was a campaign of coercion and intimidation. Welfare offices denied aid to people of Mexican descent, even legal residents and citizens. Families were told, accept a one-way ticket to Mexico or face starvation. Immigration agents and police conducted public raids, rounding up people regardless of legal status. The constant threat of deportation created a climate of fear. Many left, believing it was safer to go on their own terms than risk arrest. For American-born children, there was no choice. They were forced to leave the only home they'd ever known. The word voluntary was a deliberate distortion, sanitizing a mass injustice. The process was designed to make people feel unwelcome and powerless. The truth was hidden behind propaganda. The reality, families were exiled, not by choice, but by force. This was not repatriation, it was expulsion. Perhaps the most shocking aspect, many of those removed were American citizens. Historians estimate up to 60% of those sent to Mexico were born in the U.S. These were children of immigrants, raised as Americans, their rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Yet their citizenship was ignored, their Mexican ancestry made them targets. Local officials rarely checked citizenship status. Appearance was enough. Families were rushed onto trains, denied the chance to prove their rights. The very institutions meant to protect them orchestrated their expulsion. In Mexico, these American children were seen as outsiders, unfamiliar with the language and culture. They belonged to neither country, abandoned by the U.S., unaccepted in Mexico. This left deep scars, a sense of betrayal, loss, and identity crisis. The removal of citizens exposed a fundamental weakness in American justice. Citizenship proved fragile when fear and prejudice ruled. The legacy of this betrayal would last for generations. The removal campaign was sprawling and decentralized, involving federal, state, and local actors. The federal government provided the rhetoric and threat of deportation, while local officials executed the removals. Welfare bureaus in cities like Los Angeles and Detroit coerced families. Accept a ticket to Mexico or lose all aid. Private companies and railroads profited, offering discounted fares for mass deportations. Major employers encouraged Mexican workers to leave, sometimes with consulate involvement. Charities and mutual aid societies tried to help, but were overwhelmed. The process was chaotic. Families sold belongings for pennies, packed what they could, and boarded crowded trains. Arriving at the border, they were left in unfamiliar towns with no resources. The system was efficient, impersonal, and devastating. Bureaucracy became a tool for mass expulsion. The human cost was ignored in the rush to remove. The machinery of removal left lives shattered. The Mexican repatriation was psychological warfare. Its power lay in fear. Public raids were staged for maximum impact, with agents rounding up hundreds at a time. These spectacles sent a chilling message: no one was safe. Media coverage amplified the terror, legitimizing government actions and isolating the community. Many didn't know their rights, or were too afraid to assert them. Officials used threats and deceptive tactics, exploiting language barriers and legal confusion. The threat of family separation was a powerful weapon. Fear fractured communities. Some hid, others fled, all lived in anxiety. Social networks and mutual support systems broke down. The vibrant life of barrios was dismantled. The campaign left a legacy of distrust and division. Fear became a tool of policy. Between 500,000 and 2 million people of Mexican descent were removed in the 1930s. Los Angeles County alone lost a third of its Mexican population. Families were torn apart, communities destroyed. Many had lived in the U.S. for decades. Their children were American citizens. In Mexico, they faced poverty, few jobs, and little support. American-born children struggled with language and culture, seen as outsiders. They were exiled from home, yet foreigners in their parents' land. The trauma created a deep identity crisis for a generation. Those left behind lost friends, neighbors, and support networks. The campaign left scars: distrust of government, weakened communities, and diminished political power. The wound would take decades to heal. The human cost was immeasurable. The legacy of the Mexican repatriation is one of trauma and resilience. Survivors carried a sense of loss and betrayal, passing it down through generations. But out of this pain grew activism and a fight for civil rights. Organizations like LULAC and the American GI Forum emerged, determined to prevent future injustices. The removal left labor shortages, and by World War II, the U.S. was recruiting Mexican workers again through the Bracero program. The cycle of exclusion and recruitment became a pattern in U.S. policy. In recent years, efforts to remember this history have grown. California's Apology Act and memorials in Los Angeles acknowledge the injustice. These acts of remembrance are crucial for healing and learning. The story is a warning and a call to action. Resilience turned trauma into a movement for justice. Remembering is the first step toward change. The Mexican repatriation is not just history, it's a warning for today. Economic anxiety and nationalism still fuel scapegoating and the erosion of civil liberties. The same arguments, immigrants take jobs, drain resources, echo in modern debates. Bureaucratic agencies can still be weaponized for exclusion. The betrayal of American citizens then reminds us, citizenship is not always a shield. We must ask what it means to be American, and who gets to belong. Calls to limit birthright citizenship echo past injustices. Studying this history is an act of reckoning and defense of our ideals. Remembering the victims honors their struggle and warns us not to repeat these mistakes. Forgetting is not an option. Our future depends on learning from these hidden chapters.